they were totally unskilled in the art of reading to understand. And that's what I want to arm you with, the ability to not just read, but watch movies and listen to music. And when you're spending time with friends and when you're learning anything at all, that you're trying to truly understand and you're trying to glean truths that you can then apply to your life so that you can be a more principle-centered person. So you and I live in this crazy time called the information age, and there are literally millions of pieces of information coming at us every single day. I mean, we could get on any social platform and just consume content day in and day out and never even touch just a fraction of what's coming at us. So how in the world can we begin to filter in a way that's going to help us gain some better understanding? Because here's the thing, we can't consume it all. We can't even consume a small portion of it. But when we're exposed to something, we want to be able to discern the truth, right? Like we want to be able to have some kind of sense of, is this person lying to me? Is this true or not? Should I believe this? Should I do anything about this? It's really tough. I mean, like one simple example is like in the world I run in, business coaches or life coaches. I mean, I've been stuck for 2 years. Like, who in the world do I hire? Because, I mean, what credential do you need to be a coach? Kind of none. So how do you know who to trust? So I'm going to give you one tool today. There are other tools that are very helpful, but this one today has proven to be, in the, 10 years probably now that I've been teaching this concept, it has helped so many people to just begin to navigate all the information that's coming at them, and for them to feel like they're on more solid ground and feel like they have a place at least to start and a way to go about asking questions. We're promised, ask and you shall receive, right? And we know that our brains are brilliant problem-solving machines. And so if we'll ask good questions, we'll get good answers. If we'll ask better questions, we'll get better answers. And as soon as you start asking yourself a question, your mind is going to start trying to find the answer. So questions are absolutely key. I talk a lot about questions. A lot of the time, I think we should parent with questions. I think we should lead with questions. I think we should learn with questions. I think we should be on the internet and in these social spaces and gaining information with questions. So this is the 5 types of questions. And the best way I've found to give you an introduction to this is through a story that Mortimer Adler told in his book. I think this is in How to Read a Book. And so he's in this classroom and they're actually reading St. Thomas Aquinas's treatise on the Passions. And so he's trying to help the students actually truly understand what it is that they've read. And they have read it and they've marked it and they think that they understand it. But this is kind of the strange experience that happens in this classroom. And I call it strange because it shouldn't be happening this way, but actually Adler goes on to talk about how this has happened countless times in lots of classrooms with lots of students around lots of readings. Because even in his time, this is in 1940s and 50s, he's finding that students aren't equipped with the skills to really know how to discern and navigate truth. So he asks them, okay, can you list the order of the passions for me? And so one student, stands up or whatever he does, and he lists them off, and he tells him correctly, he names them all accurately, and then Adler says, okay, what does it mean to say that there's an order of the passions? And this student is like blank. He has no idea. He says, he had told me what St. Thomas said. Now I wanted to know what St. Thomas meant. He tried. All he could do was repeat what he had said before. Hadn't he answered me correctly? Didn't he understand the material? And he said, look, this student would have performed well on any regular test that he would have been given in a classroom. And that's what he'd been doing all in his younger years of education, even through high school. And this is why there's 5 types of questions. And the first level is the knowledge level. He just wanted to know if the student kind of had processed the information that he had read, right? Or she had read. And that's the first type of question that I tell people to ask. Just what's going on here? And one of the most important things that you can do when you're asking knowledge questions about anything is to say, what do these words mean? I can't tell you the countless times I thought I knew what a word meant and I really didn't, or it had this other nuance, or it had this other component to it. And I tell everybody all the time, especially if you're reading some original works or older works or classics of any kind, or even if you're not, it's even helpful and interesting. Go to 1828dictionary.com and find out what those words used to mean 200 years ago, because it is quite eye-opening. I have learned a lot by doing that. So you're going to ask these knowledge questions and try to find out just what you've read. Did you understand it? And we have, a lot of people, because I believe in God and we talk about God in some of the programs and products that we have. A lot of the people that we work with believe in God. And so they read some kind of core book or scripture regularly. And often those are in more of a poetic form or a metaphoric form, or there's parables or whatever the case is. And that just requires us to ask better questions about what is being said and what the words mean and all of that. And I'm going to give you a couple examples at the end. After I've gone over these 5 questions, I'm going to give you a couple examples in a couple different ways that I think is going to help demonstrate just how helpful these can be. Okay, so then he says, okay, I tried to help him. So I asked him whether love was the first. Okay, going back, the first kind of question he asked was that knowledge question that I mentioned. And then the second type was he said, what does it mean? So that's a meaning question. So that's all of our whys. It's almost like saying what and then why. It doesn't mean that every knowledge question starts with what. It doesn't mean that every meaning question starts with why. It just means that you're asking for something deeper. Why did he write this? Why is there an order of the passions? Why does he even care? Why has this book lasted for, I don't know, when did he write it? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So why is this so important? Why is it considered a classic? Why have people read it? And so he doesn't have any answers. He doesn't know why this book matters at all, why he's been asked to read it, why it's a classic, any of that. No idea. So he says, okay, I'm going to try a third kind of question. I'm going to ask him about the nature of love. Whether love was first in the sense of being a cause of other emotions. I asked him about hate, anger, hope, and fear. What is love? And so he's trying to ask what I call a principled question or a truth question. You can also think of it in terms of key ideas or key themes, getting at the root, getting at a nugget, getting at something that's more universal, getting at something that's solid, and really trying to understand what is the truth in all of this. If I understand what it is and I understand why it is, what is the key truth that's trying to be taught? And if you're spending time in things that are valuable, that are worthy of your time and effort, then there's going to be some important nuggets in there to find. So then he asks another kind of question, which I usually call the 5th type of question, just because I think we should apply everything that we've learned and done at the end. But he asks it 4th. He says, I tried still another tack. I asked the class, begging their pardon, about their own emotional experiences. So he's trying to help them understand why this work is important by asking them to evaluate their own personal experiences. They were old enough to have had a few passions. Were they ever emotionally upset at someone? What did that mean? What did that have to do with this reading? And of course, this is, especially in our educational program, something we definitely don't do. Like, our personal experience rarely matters at all, and we're rarely encouraged to make the connection between what it is that we're learning about and what's going on in our life, unless it's, unfortunately, often to label, to categorize, or to place people in boxes or in a victim space. So that's unfortunate. So he says, clearly they had not made any connection between the words they'd read in a book about the passions and their own experiences. These things were worlds apart. So I still persisted. Perhaps if they couldn't understand Aquinas from their own experience, they could get some help from the vicarious experience they got from reading novels and hearing stories. So he's like, okay, and this is the last kind of question. Let's make some connections. Let's do some interdisciplinary research. Let's look at where we've seen these passions other places, in other people, in other times, in other stories, in other books we've read, and in history and whatever. And he says they did as badly as before. They answered by telling me the story in a superficial summary of the plot. They understood the novels they had read about as little as they understood St. Thomas. Here, near the end of their schooling, they were totally unskilled in the art of reading to understand. And that's what I want to arm you with, the ability to not just read, but watch movies and listen to music. And when you're spending time with friends and when you're learning anything at all, that you're trying to truly understand and you're trying to glean truths that you can then apply to your life so that you can be a more principle-centered person. And you can have the truth make you free, which is a fundamental goal that I have, and that we are really promoting here in everything that we do. So again, there's knowledge questions, there's meaning questions, there's principle, truth, idea questions, and then there's the interdisciplinary and application, okay? And so let me give you a couple examples so that you can have a reference point around this. There's a great book called The Virginian, and I think it's Owen Wister is the author, I'm not sure. It's awesome. It's an old classic. In fact, your grandparents probably, many of them read it because it was really famous in the past. Anyway, there's a situation where the Virginian is this cowboy. He works for the judge. He has this girlfriend named Molly, and he has had to go out on this big, huge ranch that the judge owns, and they've had to kill some cattle thieves because they were, ruining their business and all of this. And so Molly's very upset by this, and she reaches out to the judge, and she and the judge get together and have this conversation. And the judge is trying to help her because what she's saying is, look, hanging cattle thieves is just like lynching in the South. And he's trying to help her understand that, no, they rest on different principles. And I just love this interaction. And I could show you other places in classics and scripture and all of that kind of thing, where questions are used to help people learn. When you pose a question and the other person, this works when you're doing scripture reading. It works when you're doing read-alouds with your kids. It works when you're in a leadership position and you're doing an evaluation of someone that's a subordinate. It works when, you're working in the community in some regard, because when other people have to grapple with quality questions and come up with their own answers, it helps them to grow and it helps them come to important conclusions on their own without you having to tell them. And so it's really, really valuable. Anyway, they have this interchange and the judge just keeps asking her questions. She says they both defy law and order. He says, now we're getting near the principle. And she says, ordinary citizens take the law in their hands. And he says, okay, yes, that's a principle, but where does that principle originate? So he says, out of whose hands do they take the law? The courts. What made the courts? I don't understand. How did they come to be any courts? The Constitution. How did there come to be a Constitution? Who made it? The delegates. Who made the delegates? I suppose they were elected or appointed or something. Who elected them? Of course, the people elected them. Call them the ordinary citizens, said the judge. I like your term. They are where the law comes from, you see. And so he has helped her walk down her own path by asking her just the next good knowledge, meaning, principle question, and they get to the truth. So as we wind down, let me give you a couple examples just so you can see these in action. And I just highly encourage you to practice like mad. If you ever come to the academy, we practice these in the academy like relentlessly. And it's quite transformative for the people who really practice it. They really have a different experience. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples. The first one is just scripture, because it's something that many of you spend time in, and it is a different form of writing. It's deeper, it's more difficult. It has all these kinds of layers. It's a true, true classic. And it's got all kinds of truths just enmeshed in there, like every phrase almost, and asking really great questions is just going to bring it alive for you and your family. So if you go to Matthew 7, and I'm not going to recount the whole thing, if you're familiar at all with the New Testament, you would have heard of the wise man who built his house on a rock and the foolish man who built his house on the sand, and how when the rains came and the floods came, then the house on the rock stood and the house on the sand washed away. And then at the end of this story, basically there's a comment in the text about everyone is really blown away with what Jesus has taught because he speaks with so much authority. They just kind of mind blown about it. Okay, so how could we deconstruct this to better get to some truths that we could apply to see it in a new way? Well, we can start by asking some knowledge questions. So what does it mean? What happened? Let's recount the story. Okay, we understand what happened in the story. So what other knowledge questions? It says, if he told the people, if they do these sayings, what does it mean to say, if they do these sayings? He says, I will liken. What does it mean to liken? Well, that's a metaphor. So what's a metaphor? Why do metaphors matter? Why did Jesus use metaphors? You could look up what a metaphor is and learn about it together. You could also talk about authority and where authority comes from and why Jesus didn't have a leadership position, but they saw authority in him. What does that mean? And what is a scribe? The scribes are blown away. They were the ones that had specific positions. So that's just a gleaning of just a very few kinds of knowledge questions you could ask. So then what about meaning? Okay, well, why is this story in the Bible? Why did Jesus teach it in the first place? Why is he using metaphors? Why do we need to have a foundation? What does it mean to have a foundation? How is the rock the foundation? What's the meaning of the rock as a foundation? What's the symbolism behind that? How could having this foundation help us have a better life? Why did Jesus have more authority than the other people? So these are all bringing meaning and richness. They're not just the hard facts. They're why all of it matters. And so you get deeper into that, and then you can start asking, okay, so if this matters so much that we have this foundation, or Jesus is drawing authority, or whatever vein you're taking, because literally you could spend several weeks on just these few verses and you could get a lot out of it. You can ask, okay, you're going to search for the truths. What in this story seems to apply not just to me, but to other people? What could anyone live from this story? Well, we could start to understand some truths about what real authority is, or some truths about the power of metaphor, or some truths about having a foundation in our lives and why foundations matter and how foundations are built and all of this kind of stuff. So it's really cool. Then you can sit and make connections. What movies have you watched recently? What books have you read? What people do you know who maybe lost their foundation and had to come back to it? Or who maybe have authority and you listen to them even though they don't have a certain important position in the world? Why are they authority to you? And there's two important reasons why we ask these interdisciplinary questions. The first is because it affirms the truth. As we find evidence for it other places, then it confirms in our hearts and minds that that is really a truth that's worth our attention and that's worth trying to apply into our lives. And it helps us see it in new ways if we see all the nuances around it. Do you know someone who listened to the wrong people? Can you connect it to things like Star Wars or Wizard of Oz? Like, what are points about that? I promise you can find connections if you're looking for them. Then the last one, how can you live the truth? What can we take from this simple biblical story that would make our lives a little bit better? What is one truth that has really hit my heart that my conscience is telling me I should do this a little bit better, and I'm going to go out and try to live it? Okay, so let me give you one last example from today where these 5 types of questions are going to help you filter the noise and help you make a whole lot more sense of what's going on in the world. So back near COVID, Black Lives Matter as an organization blew up. And I just remember at the time thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. And I had lots of people that I knew that were just like throwing money at this organization and sending out all of their posts and sharing them out like crazy. And you know what they weren't doing? They weren't asking the 5 types of questions to find out more about this organization. And you know what? I asked the 5 types of questions and I found out a lot about this organization. First of all, some knowledge questions. Did you go to the website? Did you find out about the founders of the organization and what they believed and who they were and where they came from? Did you look at any of their financials about where the money was going? Did you track the where it was being funneled, what they were spending it on? Because what we know now is that it was being spent on a lot of rallies and pillaging and hurting private property and all that kind of stuff because they were just trying to make a lot of noise. I remember the last time I went there, the first time I went there, one of the prominent people on their homepage was Malcolm X. Well, I've read his autobiography, and I know that he had a change of heart just before he was martyred, really just before he was murdered at the end of his life. But he spent a lot of time on kind of a communist track, and I know what he stood for, and I know what he was about, and I know they had Malcolm X on their website instead of Martin Luther King Jr. for an important reason. So you could look up Malcolm X, and you could look up Martin Luther King Jr., and you could find out what was different about them. So that's just the level of knowledge questions. I found out that the founders were declared open communists. What do you know about communism? I mean, we know what kind of went on in the East, but like, what else do you know about it? All important knowledge questions. So then you can start asking some meaning questions. Why are they communists? Why is Malcolm X on their website? What are the results of what they're promoting? What is their purpose? Look at their purposes. Look at their meanings. What is their purpose for existing? Why did they start this organization? What is their mission statement on their website? What do they believe? All of these kinds of things. And I found out they were promoting defunding the police. They were not helping, as far as I can tell, any actual Black people. Like, I couldn't see scholarships, I couldn't see, and now we have their financials, and there's a whole like documentary that was put out about their organization, and we know a lot more now. But like, why are they doing this? Really asking yourself, why are they doing this? And just from asking those two types of questions, just from spending maybe 20 or 30 minutes on their website before you give your precious money away, maybe you would have found out, like, maybe this isn't the best place for me to actually put my money. Maybe there would be something better for me to promote in the world. Maybe they don't actually believe the way I believe. Maybe they don't actually want what I want. Maybe they aren't actually having good fruits in their organization. They were funding riots and destruction of personal property, like I said. So then getting down to the fundamentals, what truths or non-truths were they promoting? What are their core beliefs? What do they stand for? Do their beliefs align with my beliefs? Are there any fundamental truths? And I found communism, lack of authority, and some people matter more than other people matter. And so, again, the principles that they're promoting, asking these principal questions, is there any truth? What do they believe? What are the truths what are the things they say are true that they're promoting? Asking those principle-centered, idea, truth-centered questions, and then interdisciplinary. Okay, who else believes like they believe? Where else have these things been acted out? Where else is there communism? Who else is doing what they do? And then what do my scriptures say? What do leaders that I trust say? What other organizations are they aligned with? Do I believe in those organizations? Who's supporting them and not supporting them? And so those interdisciplinary connections about other spaces where they have connections, and then asking yourself, okay, based on everything I've learned about this organization, how am I going to live out what I've learned? How am I going to apply what I've learned? Am I going to share out? I at the time, I shared a few things about what I found on their website and my concerns about it, and I did not donate money to them. And so what I'm saying is, had we as a people asked better questions about Black Lives Matter, then maybe they wouldn't have gotten the hundreds of millions of dollars, and maybe it wouldn't have been used so irresponsibly, because we know now that multi-million-dollar homes were bought. A lot of the money was ill-used. Some of the people who are really doing bad things in the world were supporting or promoting them. So ask the 5 types of questions, and it will change anything. I mean, it will change everything for you. You will know how to navigate and filter so much more effectively. You will find better truths. You will become more principle-centered. A lot of people, I talked to a woman recently who said that she never reads a book twice because there's too many books to read. And I know that if you're here, maybe you're a learner and maybe you do read. And so what I would say is quality over quantity. It doesn't matter how much information in this information age that you get through. It matters that you get that information through you. It matters that you don't just take it all in and just believe whatever you're told. It matters that you ask really good questions and you do a little bit of homework. If you know a few sources well, it helps you navigate all the other ones and it clears things up for you. And then you don't just feel like you're falling prey to every new kind of scam that's out there. You don't need to get it all through you. You just need to start with something, ask the 5 types of questions, and then slowly apply one truth after another into your life, and you will find that you have a very solid foundation built on asking and answering really high quality questions. So if you would like to practice these 5 types of questions more, I've actually written an article about it. And like I said, we do a really deep dive in the academy, so you can head over to themissiondrivenmom.com and sign up for your 7-day trial. And I promise you, practicing these and using them in a myriad of spaces in your life is going to cause you to think and parent and lead and live significantly differently in a much more principle-centered way.